What happens when unchecked arrogance collides with a quiet, unshakable power? On a transatlantic flight from New York to London, a first-class passenger makes a demand fueled by pure prejudice, refusing to sit next to a black woman. She loudly proclaims her superiority, her status, and her right to be comfortable, completely unaware that the silent woman she is insulting doesn't just have a ticket for the flight. She owns the entire airline. This isn't just a story about a confrontation at 35,000 feet. It's about the catastrophic miscalculation that brought a privileged world crashing down to earth. Stay with me to witness the moment one woman's life was dismantled, piece by piece, before the plane even landed. Before we begin, comment where you are watching from today, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now let's get into it. The first-class cabin of Airline flight, F788 from JFK to London Heathrow, was an oasis of curated tranquility. The color palette was a soothing blend of charcoal gray and muted gold. The seats were more like private pods upholstered in supple Italian leather, and the air hummed with a low, expensive thrum. Each passenger was greeted with a glass of Dom Perignon and a warm towel infused with lavender. This was the world Dr. Serafina Jordan had built, a world of precision, elegance, and seamless travel. And tonight, she was simply trying to enjoy it. Dressed in a simple but elegant black cashmere travel suit, Serafina was already settled into her window seat, 1A. Her hair was pulled back in intricate braids, and a pair of discreet diamond studs were her only jewelry. To the casual observer, she was just another successful woman on her way to a business meeting. She was engrossed in a worn paperback copy of a dense textbook on propulsion dynamics, a nostalgic indulgence from her days at MIT. She had designed the very reclining mechanism of the seat she was sitting in, a fact that brought a small, private smile to her lips. She preferred to fly incognito on her own airline at least once a quarter. It was the only way to get an unfiltered view of the customer experience, to see her creation through the eyes of those it was meant to serve. The serene atmosphere was first pricked, then torn, by the arrival of Carol Ann Miller and her husband Gregory. Carol swept into the cabin with the force of a minor weather system, draped in a cream-colored Burberry trench coat that she shed with an air of theatrical impatience. Her voice, sharp and nasal, sliced through the quiet ambiance. "Gregory, for heaven's sake, put that carry-on up there. No, not like that, you'll crush my hat box. The service on these American carriers is just getting worse and worse." She didn't seem to realize or care that Airline was her American carrier of choice for this trip. Gregory, a man who looked perpetually apologetic, scurried to do her bidding. He was tall and doughy, with a face that seemed permanently flushed with a mixture of exertion and embarrassment. He successfully stowed the luggage while his wife surveyed the cabin with a look of profound dissatisfaction. Her eyes, small and critical, swept over the other passengers before landing on her assigned seat, 1B, and the woman occupying the adjacent seat, Serafina. Carol's perfectly painted lips tightened into a thin, bloodless line. A flicker of something ugly and instantaneous crossed her features. She stopped dead in her tracks, causing a minor bottleneck for the passenger behind her. "Excuse me," she snapped, not at Serafina but at the lead flight attendant, a poised woman named Amelia who was approaching with a welcoming smile. "There seems to be a mistake." Amelia's smile remained professionally placid. "Mrs. Miller, is there a problem with your seat?" Carol gestured vaguely but dismissively toward Serafina, who had not yet looked up from her book. "This won't do. This won't do at all. I paid a premium for this seat, a very significant premium, and I will not be uncomfortable for a 7-hour flight." The word uncomfortable was laden with a meaning that was instantly, chillingly clear to Amelia. Her training kicked in, a mental checklist of de-escalation protocols, but she could already feel the familiar, sinking dread of a situation about to spiral. Gregory stepped forward, his hand lightly touching his wife's arm. "Carol, please, let's just sit down." "Don't Carol please me, Gregory," she hissed, pulling her arm away. She turned her full attention to Amelia, her voice rising in volume and pitch. "I demand to be moved, now. Find me another seat." Serafina slowly placed a leather bookmark into her textbook and closed it. She turned her head, her gaze calm and analytical, and looked at Carol Ann Miller for the first time. She didn't say a word. She simply watched, her expression unreadable, as the carefully constructed piece of her airline was about to be shattered. Amelia, the lead flight attendant, maintained her professional composure, a skill honed over a decade of dealing with the anxieties and eccentricities of privileged travelers. Her smile was a mask of serene efficiency. "Ma'am, I do understand you'd prefer another seat," she began, her tone even and soothing. "Unfortunately, our first-class cabin is completely full this evening. Your assigned seat is 1B. Carol let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That is not an acceptable answer. Full is a problem for your logistics department, not for me. I am a paying customer. Do you know who my husband is?" She gestured towards Gregory, who seemed to shrink under the sudden spotlight. "This is Gregory Miller of Miller Holdings. We spend more on travel in a year than you probably earn in 5. Now go and sort this out." A few other passengers were beginning to notice. A young man in 3A, wearing oversized headphones and a tech company hoodie, discreetly angled his phone downwards, the small red light of a recording app blinking into life. An older British couple in row 2 exchanged a look of weary disdain. Serafina remained silent, her posture relaxed. She wasn't just observing a customer service issue, she was watching a live stress test of her company's core values. She had personally overseen the drafting of Orifly's Code of Carriage, which included a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. She was curious to see how her crew, who knew her only as a face on a corporate newsletter, would implement it. Amelia's smile tightened fractionally. "Mrs. Miller, with all due respect, every passenger in this cabin has paid for their seat. The seating arrangements are final. I can assure you the seat is perfectly comfortable." "Oh, I'm sure the seat is fine," Carol retorted, her voice dripping with condescension as she finally cast a direct, venomous look at Serafina. "It's the adjacency I have a problem with. I don't know where she's been or what she's about. I have a very important meeting in London tomorrow, and I simply will not have my personal space encroached upon." The racist subtext was now overt text. The cabin, already quiet, fell into a deep, uncomfortable silence, broken only by the faint whir of the ventilation system. Serafina met Carol's gaze, her own eyes holding a profound, unnerving stillness. She didn't look angry or offended. She looked like a scientist studying a particularly fascinating and predictable chemical reaction. Gregory, now sweating visibly, tried again. "Carol, honestly, it's fine. We're just sitting. Let's not make a scene." "I am not making a scene, Gregory. I am asserting my rights," she screeched, her voice echoing in the confined space. "And you would do well to support your wife instead of cowering. Now," she turned back to Amelia, her finger jabbing the air, "you will move her, or you will move me. I don't care which. Perhaps someone in economy would be thrilled to have her seat." The suggestion that Serafina be relegated to the back of the plane hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Amelia's professional veneer finally cracked. Her expression hardened. "Ma'am, I will not be asking another passenger to move, and I will not tolerate this kind of language on my aircraft. You are creating a disturbance." "A disturbance?" Carol shrieked, now playing to the audience she had created. "My wanting a clean, appropriate environment is a disturbance? This is outrageous. I want to speak to your superior. I want the pilot. Get the captain out here right now. I'll have your job for this insolence." The situation had now breached all protocols of cabin decorum. Amelia knew she was at an impasse. She gave a subtle nod to another flight attendant, who disappeared towards the front of the plane. The call had been made. Serafina slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up, not with aggression, but with a fluid, deliberate grace. She was taller than Carol, and her calm presence seemed to suck the oxygen out of Carol's frantic tantrum. She looked past Carol directly at Amelia. "Perhaps," Serafina said, her voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority that cut through the tension, It would be best if I found another seat. Carol's face flushed with triumph. See? She understands. She can go sit in the back. Amelia looked at Serafina, her expression a mixture of apology and confusion. Ma'am, you absolutely do not have to. It's all right. Serafina interrupted gently. Let's not delay the flight any further on my account. She picked up her textbook, preparing to move. But before she could take a step, a firm, authoritative voice came from the front of the cabin. That will not be necessary. Captain David Chen stood at the entrance to the cockpit, his uniform immaculate, his expression a mask of stern disapproval. His eyes were not on Serafina or Amelia, but fixed squarely on Carol Ann Miller. The captain had left the flight deck. The ultimate authority on the aircraft had now entered the fray. The presence of Captain Chen had an immediate sobering effect on the cabin. The hushed whispers ceased, and all eyes fixed on the man in the crisp four-striped uniform. Leaving the cockpit before takeoff was a measure reserved for serious security or safety issues. By her actions, Carol Miller had just defined herself as one. I am Captain Chen, he announced, his voice calm but with an edge of steel that commanded attention. I have been apprised of the situation. Is there a problem here, Mrs. Miller? Carol, momentarily taken aback by the captain's imposing presence, quickly regained her footing. She saw his intervention not as a warning, but as an acknowledgement of her own importance. Finally, someone with some authority, she declared. Captain, your flight attendant here has been completely unhelpful. I have a simple request for a seat change, and she has been obstinate and, frankly, quite rude. Captain Chen's eyes remained locked on her. He didn't even glance at Amelia. I was informed your request was to be moved because you refused to sit next to this passenger. He gestured slightly with his head toward Serafina. Is that correct? It is, Carol said, puffing out her chest. I have my reasons. I'm a first-class passenger, and I am entitled to a comfortable and appropriate journey. It's a matter of standards. Standards, Captain Chen repeated, the word flat and devoid of emotion. Let me be unequivocal about the standards on my aircraft, Mrs. Miller. Orifly has a non-negotiable policy of zero tolerance for harassment or discrimination of any kind towards passengers or crew. That policy is outlined in the terms and conditions you agreed to when you purchased your ticket. A ripple of understanding went through the other passengers. The young man in 3A subtly adjusted his phone for a better angle. Gregory Miller's face had gone from flushed to a sickly pale white. He looked at his wife, his eyes pleading with her to stop. But Carol was too far gone, caught in the grip of her own self-righteous fury. How dare you accuse me of discrimination? She gasped, placing a hand on her chest in a gesture of wounded innocence. I am the victim here. My comfort is being ignored. I am being treated abominably. My lead flight attendant offered you a choice, Captain Chen continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intense. To take your assigned seat or to deplane. The situation has now escalated. Your disruptive behavior is delaying this flight and causing distress to the other 187 passengers on board. So I'm going to give you one final opportunity to make a choice, and I need your answer now. He took a step forward, his authority radiating through the cabin. You have two options. Option 1, you will immediately take your seat 1B and you will not say another word to this passenger or my crew for the remainder of the flight to London. Option 2, you and Mr. Miller will collect your belongings and be escorted off this aircraft by port authority officers, who are already on standby at the gate. The silence that followed was absolute. Carol's face was a storm of conflicting emotions, rage, disbelief, and for the first time, a flicker of fear. She'd pushed and pushed, always confident that the world would bend to her will, that her money and status were an impenetrable shield. For the first time in a very long time, she was facing an immovable object. Gregory finally found his voice, a desperate, strangled whisper. Carol, for God's sake, just sit down. Apologize. Let's just go. Her head whipped around to face him. Apologize? To them? Her voice was a venomous hiss. She turned back to the captain, her eyes blazing with a final, defiant gamble. She believed in her core that they wouldn't dare. The inconvenience, the paperwork, the potential lawsuit she would threaten. Surely they would back down. "This is absurd," she spat. "We are not going anywhere. We will be flying to London and you will be hearing from our lawyers. We'll own this pathetic little airline by the time we're through." It was at that moment Serafina almost smiled. The sheer, unadulterated irony was overwhelming. Captain Chen did not flinch. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture of finality. "As you wish." He turned to Amelia. "Amelia, please inform the gate agent that the Millers have accepted option 2. Have the authorities meet them on the jet bridge." He then looked directly at Carol and Gregory Miller. "Collect your hand luggage, now." The reality of the situation finally crashed down on Carol. Her jaw fell open. The blood drained from her face. This wasn't happening, it couldn't be. People like her didn't get kicked off planes. People like her were the reason planes flew. "No," she stammered. "Wait. You can't. We—" But it was too late. The gears of consequence were already in motion. 2 Port Authority officers appeared at the cabin door, their presence stark and official. The point of no return had been crossed. The deplaning of Carol and Gregory Miller was a grimly efficient affair. Humiliation radiated from them in waves. Carol, stripped of her bluster, was reduced to a series of choked, incoherent protests. Gregory, his face a mask of misery, avoided eye contact with everyone as he wrestled their carry-on bags from the overhead bin. The other passengers watched in silence, a mixture of relief and morbid fascination on their faces. The young man in 3A stopped recording only after the cabin door closed behind the ejected couple and the Port Authority officers. He immediately began uploading. As the door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, a palpable sense of release swept through the cabin. It was as if a pressure system had been lifted. The flight attendants, led by Amelia, moved quickly and professionally to prepare for departure, their movements crisp and reassuring. Captain Chen made a brief, calm announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the short delay. We are now cleared for departure and expect to make up the time en route. Thank you for your patience." Serafina, who had remained standing throughout the entire ordeal, finally sat back down in seat 1A. Amelia approached her, her expression deeply apologetic. "Ma'am, on behalf of the entire crew, I am so profoundly sorry you had to experience that. Her behavior was inexcusable." Serafina offered her a small, reassuring smile. "You have nothing to apologize for, Amelia. You and the captain handled a very difficult situation with exceptional professionalism." Amelia seemed taken aback by the compliment, and even more so by the calm, authoritative way it was delivered. "Thank you, ma'am. We were just following procedure." "Procedure is one thing," Serafina said, her eyes warm and sincere. "Poise under that kind of pressure is another. You were exemplary. Please extend my personal gratitude to Captain Chen as well." "I will, thank you," Amelia replied, still slightly bewildered by this passenger who seemed entirely unfazed by the ugly scene that had just unfolded around her. "Can I get you anything before takeoff? Another glass of champagne, perhaps?" "That would be lovely, thank you," Serafina said. As Amelia retreated to the galley, Serafina looked out the window as the ground crew pushed the aircraft back from the gate. The first phase of the test was complete. Her crew had passed with flying colors, upholding the airline's values even when faced with a belligerent, litigious passenger. They had protected another passenger, and the integrity of their flight, without knowing that the passenger they were protecting held the fate of their careers and the entire airline in her hands. Once the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign was switched off, Serafina excused herself. She didn't go to the lavatory. Instead, she walked to the forward galley where Amelia was preparing the drink service. "Amelia," she said quietly, "would it be possible to use the cabin phone? I need to make a brief call to our ground operations. I'll use my own satellite account, of course." It was a slightly unusual request, but not unheard of for high-level executives. "Of course, ma'am," Amelia said, pointing her to the crew handset. Serafina picked up the phone and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a crisp male voice answered. "Liam, it's Sarah." "Dr. Jordan, is everything all right? I wasn't expecting to hear from you until you landed." Liam was her executive assistant, a man for whom unflappable was a default state. "Everything is fine, the flight is wonderful," she said, her voice low. "But we had a minor incident during boarding. 2 passengers, a Carol Ann and Gregory Miller, were deplaned from AF 788 at JFK. "I see. I'll make a note." "I need you to do more than that," Serafina instructed, her tone shifting from pleasant to surgically precise. "I want you to access their PNR. Flag them. Effective immediately. They are to be placed on the permanent no-fly list for AuraFly and all our code-share partners. I want their frequent flyer accounts and any associated credit cards terminated. And Liam, I want you to attach a note to their file. Authority code, Sierra Juliet 1. That's my personal authorization." There was a pause on the other end, followed by the faint sound of typing. Sierra Juliet 1 was the highest level command in the AuraFly system, an override code known to only 3 people, Serafina, her CEO, and the head of global security. Using it for a passenger ban was like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and it signaled that this was no ordinary incident. "Consider it done, Dr. Jordan," Liam said. "File flagged. PNR status is now banned, do not accommodate. It's already propagating through the Alliance network." "Thank you, Liam," Serafina said. "One more thing. Please draft a commendation and a discretionary bonus for the entire cabin and flight deck crew of AF 788, citing exceptional professionalism in conflict resolution. Make it substantial, and single out Captain David Chen and lead flight attendant Amelia Hayes for special recognition." "Right away. Anything else?" "No, that's all for now. I'll see you in London." She hung up the phone. As she turned, she saw Amelia looking at her, a curious expression on her face. Serafina simply smiled. "Just clearing up a little mess they left behind on the ground," she said vaguely, before walking back to her seat. The first threads of karma had been spun. On the ground, in the brightly lit impersonal chaos of the JFK terminal, Carol Miller was about to discover that being kicked off a plane was only the beginning of her problems. Back in the terminal, Carol Miller was operating at a level of incandescent rage. The initial shock of being ejected had worn off, replaced by a volcanic fury. She was at the AuraFly first-class customer service desk, a sleek marble counter designed to soothe, not incite. It was failing spectacularly. "This is the most unprofessional, disgraceful, and frankly illegal treatment I have ever received," she was shouting at the customer service manager, a man named Marcus, whose name badge she had pointedly ignored. "We were assaulted. We were humiliated. I want you to book us on the next flight to London. Not with your shambles of an airline, obviously. Book us on British Airways, first class, and I want a full refund plus compensation for our distress." Gregory stood a few feet behind her, wringing his hands and trying to become invisible. He had seen the video a fellow passenger had already posted to Twitter, tagged with #AuraFly and #Karen on a plane. His stomach was doing somersaults that had nothing to do with air travel. Marcus, the manager, had the pained but patient expression of a man who had seen it all. He typed their names into the system, his brow furrowing as he read the screen. He typed again, thinking there must be a mistake. He read the note that had just appeared on their profile. It was short, brutal, and carried an authorization code he had only ever seen in training manuals. He looked up from his monitor, his demeanor having shifted from accommodating to impassive. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I cannot rebook you," he said, his voice flat. "What do you mean you cannot rebook me?" Carol screeched, her voice attracting even more attention. "Are you incompetent? Just do your job." "According to our system, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, your tickets have been canceled, and you have both been permanently banned from flying with AuraFly," Marcus stated, choosing his words carefully. Carol stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "But banned? Permanently? You can't do that. Furthermore," Marcus continued, his eyes on the screen, As per our alliance agreements, this ban extends to all our partner airlines in the Elysian Alliance. That includes British Airways, Cathay Pacific, and several others. Your frequent flyer status has been revoked and all accrued miles have been forfeited. The scale of the disaster was beginning to dawn on Gregory. The Elysian Alliance was the premier global airline network. They hadn't just been banned from one flight. They had been effectively blacklisted from the entire world of premium air travel. "This is insane," Carol shrieked, slamming her hand on the marble counter. The sound cracked through the terminal. "On whose authority? Who would dare do this? I want a name. I want to speak to your corporate office right now." Marcus took a deep breath. "Ma'am, the decision is final, and it comes from the highest level of this company. There is no appeal. The note on your file simply says, Authority, S. Jordan." The name meant nothing to Carol. It was just another name on a list of people she intended to ruin. S. Jordan? Who the hell is S. Jordan? I'll have their job. I'll have their house. Gregory, call Robert. Get the legal team on the phone now. Gregory was no longer listening. He was staring at his own phone, his face ashen. The video, posted less than an hour ago, was exploding. It had already been picked up by several major news aggregators and was racing across social media platforms with the hashtag #AuraFlyRacist. His wife's face, contorted in a mask of ugly entitlement, was the thumbnail. He could see comments flooding in by the second. "Carol," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "we have a much bigger problem." But Carol was past listening. Her tirade had reached a fever pitch, and Marcus, seeing that the situation was now a security issue, discreetly pressed a button under his desk. Within moments, 2 Port Authority officers, the same ones who had escorted them from the plane, were walking purposefully towards the desk. "Ma'am, you're causing a public disturbance," the first officer said, his voice firm but calm. "You need to lower your voice and step away from the counter." "I will not," Carol yelled. "I am the victim here. This airline is persecuting me." As she continued to scream, the officer made a decision. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." He put a hand gently but firmly on her arm. That was the final trigger. Carol yanked her arm back and, in a fit of uncontrolled rage, swung her oversized designer handbag, striking the officer on the shoulder. The entire terminal seemed to gasp at once. The second officer moved in instantly, and with practiced efficiency, they had Carol's hands behind her back, the sharp click of handcuffs echoing in the sudden shocked silence. "You are under arrest for assaulting a police officer," the officer stated calmly. As they led a now sobbing Carol Miller away, Gregory stood frozen, his phone still clutched in his hand. He watched his wife being escorted towards a police precinct, not a first-class lounge. The video on his screen now had over 1 million views. The name Gregory Miller, Miller Holdings, was mentioned in the top comment. The karma that had begun at 35,000 feet was accelerating with terrifying speed, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it was far from over. While Carol Miller's world was beginning to fracture in the harsh fluorescent lighting of a JFK terminal, the world aboard Flight AF 788 had settled into the serene rhythm of an overnight transatlantic crossing. The cabin lights were dimmed to a soft twilight blue. Most passengers were asleep, cocooned in their private pods, the gentle hum of the Rolls-Royce engines a constant soothing presence. For Dr. Serafina Jordan, however, sleep was a distant prospect. Her mind, an engine in its own right, was still running at full power. She sipped a glass of still water, the textbook on propulsion dynamics lying forgotten in her lap. She wasn't angry. Anger was a volatile, inefficient emotion. What she felt was a profound and weary disappointment, the kind a master craftsman feels upon discovering a flaw not in their creation, but in the very material of the world it inhabits. She had built this airline, this airborne sanctuary, with the precision of an engineer. Every element, from the ergonomics of the seats to the acoustic dampening in the fuselage, was designed to create an environment of seamless tranquility. Yet all it took was one person's ancient, ugly prejudice to shatter that peace. She thought back to her early days at MIT, then at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. She remembered the subtle dismissals, the patronizing tones from older male colleagues, the surprise on people's faces when she, a young black woman, was the lead engineer on a critical project. She had channeled every single one of those slights not into bitterness but into fuel. She had vowed to build something so excellent, so undeniably superior, that it would stand as a silent, soaring rebuke to all the low expectations she had ever faced. Aura Fly was that rebuke, and Carol Miller had just tried to deface it. But then a different feeling surfaced, pushing aside the disappointment. A deep, swelling pride. Her crew, the system she had put in place, the culture she had tried to foster, it had held. Amelia with her training and her grit, Captain Chen with his calm and unshakable authority. They hadn't just followed a manual, they had embodied a philosophy. They had acted as guardians of the sanctuary. And for that, they deserved more than a commendation. They deserved to know who they were fighting for. About 4 hours into the flight, as the aircraft cruised serenely over the vast, dark expanse of the Atlantic, Serafina gently caught Amelia's eye as she passed through the cabin. "Amelia," she said softly, "when Captain Chen is on his scheduled break from the flight deck, would you be so kind as to ask him to join us in the forward galley? I feel a formal report on the earlier incident is warranted, and I'd like to provide my statement to you both directly." The request sounded official, almost corporate. Amelia nodded, her expression serious. "Of course, ma'am, I'll let him know." She assumed this calm, important passenger was likely a high-level executive at a major company, perhaps even a government official, someone for whom a formal report was standard procedure. 20 minutes later, the summons was fulfilled. The galley, though spacious by airline standards, felt intimate. It was a world of brushed stainless steel, neatly stowed service carts, and the quiet aroma of fresh coffee. Captain David Chen entered, ducking his head slightly, his uniform jacket still immaculate. He and Amelia stood before Serafina, their expressions professional and attentive, like two students before a respected professor. "Thank you both for your time," Serafina began, her tone measured and calm. "I don't want to take you away from your duties for long. I was deeply impressed with how you handled the situation with Mrs. Miller. I have a few questions, if you don't mind, for my own understanding." "Not at all, ma'am," Captain Chen said. "We're happy to clarify anything." "Amelia," Serafina said, turning to her first, "you were the first point of contact. You cycled through several de-escalation tactics, all of which she rejected. At what point in your professional judgment did you conclude that the situation was unsalvageable without higher intervention?" Amelia thought for a moment, appreciating the precision of the question. "It was when she demanded we remove you from your seat and suggested you be moved to economy. At that point, it was no longer about a simple preference or discomfort. It was a targeted, discriminatory demand. That's a red line for us. It creates a hostile environment, not just for the targeted passenger, but for the crew and everyone else who witnesses it." "A perfect assessment," Serafina nodded. She then turned to the captain. "And for you, Captain, leaving the flight deck before departure is a significant decision. What was the final trigger in the information you received?" "It was the passenger's refusal to comply with crew instructions, combined with the nature of her complaint which Amelia had relayed," Chen explained, his voice steady. "A disruptive passenger is a safety risk. It's an unknown variable. My primary job is to ensure the safety and security of this flight from gate to gate. Her escalating behavior and the clear discriminatory intent posed a direct threat to the good order and discipline required on an aircraft. When I was informed she was demanding my presence, I knew the crew's authority had been completely undermined. It was time for the aircraft's ultimate authority to resolve it, definitively." Serafina listened, her expression unreadable but intensely focused. "And neither of you hesitated even when she threatened lawsuits and invoked her husband's name?" Amelia and Captain Chen exchanged a brief look. It was Amelia who answered. "Ma'am, we're trained for that. People threaten things all the time. But our protocols and the values of this airline are clear. We don't bow to intimidation, especially when it's in the service of bigotry. We did what we believe Orifly would expect us to do. A slow, genuine smile spread across Serafina's face. You did indeed, she said. There's a reason I'm asking these questions in such detail. It's because the values you're talking about, I wrote them myself. I have more than just a vested interest in this airline's reputation. It's personal. She let that statement hang in the quiet hum of the galley for a beat. She watched their faces, seeing the flicker of confusion give way to dawning comprehension. I apologize for the lack of a proper introduction earlier, she said, her voice softening. My name is Dr. Serafina Jordan. The silence that followed was absolute, deeper than the quiet of the sleeping cabin. The name, seemed to physically alter the atmosphere in the small space. Captain Chen, a man trained to handle engine failures and catastrophic decompression, stood utterly frozen, his professional mask vaporized and replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. His mind was racing, connecting the dots, the quiet confidence, the analytical questions, the strange authority she projected even while sitting in a passenger seat. Amelia's reaction was more visible. Her eyes widened, and her hand instinctively went to her mouth. She felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up her neck as she mentally replayed every interaction. Another glass of champagne, ma'am? She had been offering beverage service to the woman who owned the entire fleet. She suddenly remembered the all-hands email from a year ago announcing the new A350S, a photo of Dr. Jordan, poised and brilliant in a business suit, standing in front of a blueprint. The woman in the photo was the same woman standing before her now, just stripped of the corporate armor. Dr. Jordan, Captain Chen finally managed to say, his voice an octave lower than usual. We had no idea. That was the point, Serafina said kindly, her smile putting them at ease. I'm an engineer by trade. You can't understand a complex machine by reading the manual in an office. You have to be inside it, feel its vibrations, see how it performs under stress. Today, I put my creation under the most unpleasant kind of stress test imaginable. And you, she looked at them both, her eyes shining with sincerity. You performed flawlessly. The phone call I made earlier was to my executive office. I have already authorized a substantial bonus and a formal commendation for every single member of this flight's crew, and I've asked them to create a new company-wide award to be called the Orifly Wings of Integrity. You two will be its first recipients. Amelia felt tears welling in her eyes, not from stress or fear, but from a profound, overwhelming sense of validation. To not only be proven right, but to be honored for it by the visionary founder herself was more than she had ever imagined. As this quiet, powerful revelation took place at 35,000 feet, the digital shockwaves on the ground were reaching a crescendo. The video, filmed by the tech employee in Seat 3A, had achieved a viral velocity that was staggering. He had posted it with a simple caption, "Happening now on Orifly Flight AF 788. This woman is refusing to sit next to a black passenger. Crew is handling it professionally." That was all it took. The clip was devoured by the internet. News organizations, alerted by algorithms and online editors, ripped the video and embedded it in articles with incendiary headlines. On Twitter, #OriflyRacist was a raging inferno of commentary. Carol Miller's face was a meme. Amateur sleuths had identified her and her husband within an hour. The name Miller Holdings was plastered everywhere. In a glass-walled office overlooking Palo Alto, Julian Croft, the CEO of Ethelred Digital, was preparing to go home when his chief communications officer burst in without knocking, an iPad in her hand. "Julian, you need to see this. It involves one of our primary vendors." She played the video. Julian, a man known for his calm, almost zen-like demeanor, watched with a stony face. He saw Carol's venomous tirade, her entitled demands, and Gregory's weak, ineffectual presence beside her. He didn't just see a disruptive passenger. He saw a walking, talking embodiment of everything his company's billion-dollar brand identity was designed to fight against. He saw a reputational contagion. When the video finished, he was silent for a full 10 seconds. Then he looked at his comms chief, his eyes cold as steel. "Who is our lead counsel on the Miller Holdings contract?" "Janet Pierce," she replied. "Get her on the phone, now," he commanded. He picked up his own phone and dialed his COO. "Mark, have you seen the Hash Orifly video?" "Good. Then you know what this is. This is a 5-alarm fire. I want our partnership with Miller Holdings terminated by sunrise. Find the clause. Moral turpitude. Conduct detrimental to our brand. I don't care what you have to use. We are getting out, and we are getting out now. Draft a press release. I want the world to know that we severed ties the moment this came to light. We will not be associated with that poison." He hung up and stood, walking to the vast window that overlooked the sprawling campus he had built. He had spent decades and billions of dollars cultivating an image of Ethelred as an ethical, forward-thinking, and inclusive company. To be linked in any way to the primitive bigotry on display in that video was an existential threat. The decision wasn't just about morals, it was about survival. The Millers had become toxic assets, and he was about to write them off, permanently. The hardest part of the karma was just beginning to fall. The descent into London was a masterpiece of controlled power. The engines of the Airbus A350 whispering as the sprawling city lights emerged from the darkness below. For the passengers of Flight AF 788, it was the end of a journey. For Serafina Jordan, it was the beginning of the final act. The crew, now aware of her identity, moved with a new, almost reverential precision. Amelia approached her as the plane taxied to the gate, her demeanor a blend of professional duty and genuine awe. "Dr. Jordan," she said, her voice low, "on behalf of the crew, I just want to say, it was an honor." Serafina looked up from the window, her gaze meeting Amelia's. "The honor was all mine, Amelia. You represent the very best of what I hoped this airline would be." She was the first to deplane, stepping onto the jet bridge not into the anonymous bustle of the arrivals hall, but into the calm, waiting presence of Marcus Thorne, the sharp, impeccably dressed CEO she had entrusted with Orifly's daily operations. He wasn't smiling. "Sarah," he greeted her, his voice grim as he handed her a tablet. "Welcome to London. I wish the circumstances were better. It's gone nuclear." They bypassed the main terminal, walking through private corridors reserved for staff and VIPs. The tablet in Serafina's hands painted a picture of utter digital pandemonium. It wasn't just one viral video anymore. It was an ecosystem of outrage. The original clip had been mirrored hundreds of times. Major news outlets from CNN to the BBC had picked up the story. #Orifly racist and #Carol Miller were the top 2 trending topics worldwide. "Our social media sentiment analysis is off the charts," Marcus said, keeping pace with her. 98% positive sentiment towards Orifly, Captain Chen, and Amelia. Our brand is being lauded for its uncompromising stance on decency. But the blowback on the Millers, it's a digital firestorm." He swiped to another screen showing real-time market data. A graph showed the stock price for Miller Holdings, Gregory's company. It was a cliff. They lost 12% of their value in after-hours trading based on the initial reports. The markets in Asia are about to open, and the analysts are predicting a bloodbath. Their PR department has issued 3 different statements, each one more pathetic than the last. They tried to blame it on a stressful travel day and a private matter that was regrettably made public. Serafina scoffed. "They're calling raw, unfiltered bigotry a private matter." "They are," Marcus confirmed, "and no one is buying it. But this is the part that will truly cripple them." He swiped again, bringing up a press release that had been issued just 30 minutes earlier. The logo was for Ethelred Digital, a titan in the tech industry. Serafina stopped walking and read the statement aloud, her voice a low murmur. "Ethelred Digital is built on a foundation of respect, inclusion, and a commitment to a better global community. The behavior displayed by associates of Miller Holdings, which has come to light in the last several hours, is in direct and profound violation of these shared values. It represents a brand toxicity that we cannot and will not tolerate. Therefore, effective immediately, Ethelred Digital is terminating its multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract with Miller Holdings under the Moral Turpitude Clause. My God, Marcus, that's not just a client, that was their anchor. 42% of their annual revenue gone, Marcus said flatly. Julian Croft at Ethelred doesn't mess around. He's built his brand on being a progressive corporate leader. Harboring a partnership with the Millers now would be brand suicide for him. He cut them loose before the contagion could spread. They reached a black town car waiting for them on the tarmac. As the driver took her bag, Serafina paused and looked back at the gleaming aircraft she had just left, its Aurafly logo a subtle, elegant swirl on the tail fin. "Get our legal team to draft a statement," she instructed Marcus. "I want it to be firm, but not celebratory. We don't gloat. We state our unwavering support for our crew. We reaffirm our zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind. And we end by saying that Aurafly believes the sky is for everyone. I'll approve the draft in the car." "Already on it," Marcus replied, holding the door for her. "I also took the liberty of preemptively reaching out to the Port Authority Union at JFK. I let them know that we stand fully behind their officers and will make our security footage available for the prosecution of Mrs. Miller for assault." Serafina nodded, a grim satisfaction settling in. "Good. Every gear in this machine needs to turn in the same direction, towards accountability." As the car sped away into the London night, the full weight of that machine was crashing down upon the Millers in New York. Gregory Miller sat in the back of a taxi, the stench of stale coffee and cheap air freshener choking him. He had just posted the $25,000 bail for Carol, whose brief stay in a holding cell had left her hysterical and disheveled. The ride back to their Park Avenue apartment was a study in suffocating silence. Carol sobbed quietly, a pathetic hiccuping sound while Gregory stared at his phone, watching his life unravel in real time. His phone had been vibrating non-stop for hours. Angry texts from board members, missed calls from his frantic CFO, an email from the board of their country club coldly informing him of their immediate and indefinite suspension, a notification that the parent committee at the exclusive private school their children had long since graduated from had voted to remove the Miller family plaque from the library wing they had funded. They were being systematically erased. The final, fatal blow had come an hour ago. He had managed to get Julian Croft, the CEO of Ethelred Digital, on the phone. The conversation was brief and brutal. "Greg, I've seen the video," Julian had said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "Julian, please, it's a misunderstanding. She wasn't herself. The stress—" "Don't," Julian cut him off, his voice like ice. "Don't you dare manage me, Greg. I watched it. We all watched it, my entire executive team. We watched your wife spew racist venom at a woman for existing. And we watched you stand there and do nothing. You were complicit in your silence." "I tried to stop her," Gregory pleaded, his voice cracking. "You tried to quiet her down because she was making a scene, not because what she was saying was morally repugnant," Julian countered. "There's a universe of difference. My company employs 60,000 people from every background imaginable. How can I look them in the eye if I'm in business with someone who tolerates that? The statement is out. The contract is terminated. We're done, Greg. Don't call me again." The line went dead. Now in the taxi, Carol finally spoke, her voice thick with tears and denial. "You have to fix this, Gregory. You have to call Robert, our lawyer. We'll sue them. We'll sue the airline, the police, the person who filmed it." Gregory finally snapped. He turned to her, his face a pale, trembling mask of fury. "Sue them? Are you insane? There is nothing to fix. It's over, Carol. Over," he roared, his voice filling the small space. "The Ethelred contract is gone. The stock is in the toilet. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning, and I can promise you it's not to give me a raise. Our name, our entire family name, is now synonymous with racist viral video. This isn't a fire we can put out, this is a nuclear winter. And you were the one who pushed the button. His tirade silenced her. She stared at him, shocked. In 30 years of marriage, he had never raised his voice to her like that. She saw in his eyes not the doting, enabling husband, but a stranger looking at her with pure, undiluted contempt. She finally understood. She hadn't just made a scene. She had torched their entire world. The next morning, Gregory Miller walked into the boardroom of Miller Holdings, a company his own father had built from nothing. The faces that greeted him were cold, impassive slates. There was no sympathy, no camaraderie. This was an execution. The lead director, a man who had been a groomsman at his wedding, didn't waste time with pleasantries. Gregory, we've all seen the numbers. We've all read the client statements. The reputational damage is catastrophic and irreversible. The board has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders, and that duty now requires us to sever all ties with the source of this crisis. The vote was unanimous. We are invoking the conduct detrimental to the company clause in your contract. We've prepared a severance package, contingent on your immediate and quiet resignation. Gregory stood there, his bespoke suit suddenly feeling like a cheap costume. He was being fired from his own life. He looked around the room, at the men he had played golf with, whose children had grown up with his. He found no allies. There was only the cold, hard calculus of business. He was no longer an asset. He was a liability, a contagion. And he was being cut away to save the host. Weeks later, the furor had died down, replaced by the enduring stain of infamy. The Millers had sold their apartment and retreated from public life, their story a cautionary tale told in hushed tones in the circles they once dominated. For Aura Fly, however, the story had become a legend, a defining moment. Serafina Jordan stood on a specially constructed stage in the center of Hangar 1 at JFK, a cavernous space that usually housed two of her A350s. Today, it was filled with over 1,000 employees, from baggage handlers and engineers to pilots and cabin crew. Behind her, polished to a mirror shine, was the very aircraft that had served as the stage for the incident. She had invited the entire crew of AF 788 to the stage. They stood beside her, looking overwhelmed and proud as the assembled crowd gave them a thunderous, sustained standing ovation. When the applause finally subsided, Serafina stepped to the podium. "Family," she began, her voice warm and powerful, filling the hangar. "Today, we are here to celebrate a group of people who, on a routine flight, were faced with an extraordinary test. They were not tested on their knowledge of safety procedures or their ability to serve a meal. They were tested on their character. They were tested on their humanity." She looked at Captain Chen, then at Amelia. In the face of ugliness, they chose grace. In the face of intolerance, they chose integrity. They were asked to bend our rules, to compromise our core values for the comfort of a bully, and they refused. They stood their ground not just for one passenger, but for every passenger and every employee who has ever been made to feel less than. They reminded the world that Aura Fly is more than an airline. We are a community, and in this community, everyone has a right to be treated with dignity. She paused, letting the words sink in. "I founded this company on a simple belief born from my own experiences. As an engineer, as a black woman, I've sat in 1,000 rooms where people made assumptions about me. I know what it feels like to be overlooked or underestimated. I started Aura Fly to create a space where excellence was the only metric, and respect was the universal language. The actions of this crew proved that this belief isn't just a plaque on a wall in the corporate office. It is a living, breathing principle that guides us at 35,000 feet and on the ground." She then unveiled a new company honor, the Aura Fly Wings of Integrity. It was a beautiful pin, a pair of platinum wings cradling a small, deep blue sapphire. She personally pinned one on the uniform of each crew member, from the captain to the newest flight attendant, shaking their hands and thanking them individually. The event concluded not as a corporate meeting, but as a celebration. Serafina mingled with her employees, listening to their stories, laughing with their families. She had turned a moment of public hatred into the company's finest hour. She had shown her employees that their principles had power, and that their leadership, right from the very top, would always have their back. The final reckoning for the Millers was not just the loss of their money or status. It was the crushing irrelevance that followed. They were a footnote in someone else's much greater story. Their legacy was a viral video of their worst moment. Serafina's legacy was the culture of respect she was building, flight by flight, person by person, a legacy that soared high above the wreckage of their hate. The story of Carol Miller is a stark reminder that the world can change in an instant. She boarded that flight believing her privilege was a shield, only to discover it was a house of cards. The karma she received wasn't just about losing her seat, it was about losing everything, because she had forgotten the most basic rule of human decency. Respect costs nothing, but the lack of it can cost you everything you hold dear. What did you think of the consequences the Millers faced? Was it a fitting end to their arrogance, or did it go too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love seeing stories where justice is served and karma hits back hard, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who appreciates a powerful story, and most importantly, subscribing to the channel for more real-life dramas just like this one. Your support helps us continue to bring these incredible narratives to light. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.